I think if you've ever thought of changing jobs or find yourself looking for a job, you have heard of this site called Indeed. It is the market leader as a place for employers to go and put up their job descriptions and to seek candidates. And of course, a place for candidates to find their next career opportunity. I am super, super excited to have Lisa Ramirez join us today. Lisa is someone that I followed online for a while, and I thought she would be a perfect person to bring onto the podcast because there's so much influx in the job market today. I want to hear how Indeed is sort of approaching all of this uncertainty and change. She's a senior vice president of operations and client success, which is music to my ears. Client success, there are so many companies that talk about that, but very few that actually follow through with it. And from what I can tell in my research, Lisa lives that title for this company. And I got to tell you, just interacting with her and her team just to get this interview set up, I have been blown away by her professionalism, her approach to making sure all the ducks are in a row, and just her commitment to doing this. I'm super grateful that she agreed to be a part of the Ripple Effect podcast. So, with no further ado, let's dive in with Lisa Ramirez from Indeed. First and foremost, thank you so much, Lisa, for joining the Ripple Effect podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic. I am super excited. I think I maybe told you this. I was a little nervous because you are like a rock star with a major company like Indeed. And I was like, I got to bring my A game. And I'm just so grateful that you agreed to be a part of this. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm super glad to be here. I'm not totally sure I agree with the rock star, but status. I'm really just me, but I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, you is definitely a rock star. I will just tell you that.
Okay.
I will say
Okay.
I did some research on you, and I kind of have sort of looked at your work history a little bit and kind of seen, how your career path has unfolded. And I certainly want to get into that. But I just have to ask, just as we kick off, give us a little bit of sense of kind of your origin story. Kind of how did you end up where you are
Mm,
today? And not necessarily just from the career aspects, but like sort of give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, kind of,
mm.
sort of what makes Lisa Lisa.
Well, I grew up all over, and that is a huge part of my origin story. So I moved to New Orleans when I was probably four. I moved to East Bay, San Francisco when I was in middle school. I moved to Texas when I was in high school. And everywhere I went, I had to sort of learn a new culture, almost a new language,
Yeah.
and really a new way of doing things. And by the way, I love all of those places. They're all very dear to my heart. But it really taught me, and in each successive move, it taught me to just dive in. So I was like really tentative the first time I moved, probably a little bit less tentative the second. By the third time, I thought like I don't have time. I'm a sophomore in high school. I got to get after this, and I think that has a lot to do with like
Sure.
one sort of like my adaptability and sort of being able, and that sort of led me to work in a lot of different industries and just jump in and try to learn new things. And so I have lived in Austin for over 20 years now, which
Yeah.
feels really odd. I
Yeah.
think it's shocked everyone in my life. But that initial having to relearn over and over again, I think. And granted, as a teenager, I was really surly to my parents about this whole situation. So thanks, Dad, for making me move and grounding me in this way. But I do think it led to me being really comfortable in a lot of different settings. The other thing that happened when I was really in high school is I really started getting involved in leadership activities. And,
Okay.
everyone's heard the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours to
Yeah.
be an expert. And recently I realized like I'm well past 10,000 hours in like leadership training and all of that. And so I think that had a lot to do with sort of the way I look at the world and the way that I think about my team and the work that I do. And so I would say, those two things together are really at my core.
That's all. So I have to assume that your family might have been connected to the military, which is why you moved around, or was it witness protection program? I just, it could be either, right?
It's right in the middle, the oil and gas industry.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
my dad worked for Chevron for 35 years, 39 years maybe. And so we followed his career.
Well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. So his career brought you to the Central Texas area, but what has kept you here? What's kept you in Austin?
Um, Actually, his career brought us to Houston,
Houston.
and
Okay.
yeah, and my parents said that I would go to college in Texas, and I said, then I'm going to Austin. And so I came to school here in the late 90s and really fell in love. For me, Austin is the closest you can get to California and still be in the South.
Yep.
And so it's this really nice mix. But more than anything, it's the people. I lived in New York City for a year in my professional career, and I loved living in New York City. But I loved it even more when my friends from Texas came. And so I realized that Austin was the spot for me, and I really, really enjoy the spirit, the atmosphere, the sort of energy, the diversity. Went to my daughter's talent show this morning. There was a really amazing rhythmic gymnast next to a singer, next to and it just sort of encapsulates Austin for me. And so I really love it. Good.
So you went to the University of Texas, and
I
so you're a
did.
Longhorn Hook'em. My son
I
went there,
am.
graduated with his master's degree from there, and just such a great, great school. Was there something once you got to Austin that kind of kept you here and decided to, hey, this is where I'm going to build my career?
Yeah, well, I didn't stay.
Okay.
When I graduated from the University of Texas, everybody went to Houston or Dallas.
Yeah.
The only people that got to stay in Austin worked at Dell or Trilogy. And
Yeah.
I got a job in consulting. And so I went to Houston,
Okay.
but I traveled all the time. And Houston's a great city to live in if you're going to travel.
Yes.
And so, and then I had the opportunity to live in New York City. And so I did that. And when I realized I wasn't going to stay in New York City, I would say that was my like circuitous route to Austin, because at every point I was just trying to figure out how to get back to Austin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had the opportunity when I left New York actually to work at the University of Texas. And so that was just like a, dream job for a
Oh, yeah.
Longhorn, is to go back and work there. And so it was a phenomenal experience, but it also is a really it's kind of a slow moving environment. As a staff member, it's very vibrant as a
Yep.
student, and as a staff member, it was a little bit slower. And so I went back into consulting, but I stayed. But it was really always, if there had been a job in Austin after graduation, I would have
Would
stayed.
have been
There
there.
just
Yeah.
wasn't. And I actually think that places like Indeed are the reason there are good jobs in Austin, because Dell really started it. But if you think about the tech transformation that's happened in the city, I'm so thankful to our founder, Ronnie Gahan, who I did not know at the time that it was founded, but I'm just so thankful that companies like Indeed exist in Austin, because it does mean a lot of really great jobs for folks. And it's been great to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And how different the city has changed over that period of time, right? I mean, it's just it even within the last 10 years, it doesn't even look and feel the same in a lot of ways.
That's right. That's right. The building behind me is where I had went to a like sorority formal and college, and now it's like it's like now my building sits above it, and it's like that was the biggest building in downtown Austin. And so there are little things like that. My first day in the office, I looked out and I thought, I can see my entire adult life. I can see the hospital where I had my daughter, like the dorm I lived in freshman year, um, but it's just so dramatically different and vibrant.
That's a full circle moment for you when you
Yeah,
realize that for sure. I
yeah.
I I noticed that, obviously that you spent some time at NetSpend, and tell us a little bit about that journey and then ultimately what led you to Indeed.
Sure. So I was traveling quite a bit for as a consultant. So I was actually in London with an old boss, and he mentioned, you're getting older, and it seems like you should probably get off the road. You should talk to this company, Netspend. And it turned out it was 7 blocks from my house, my condo at the time. And so I started talking to the CEO at the time, and what they really needed was somebody to come in and manage white labeled partnerships. So the
Okay.
company had been around for a while, but they just signed Capital One, Virgin Mobile, and one other that didn't launch. And so they needed somebody to come in and be a strategic account manager and get those programs launched. And so that was my entree. At the time, it was a private company. It was, maybe 100 people. I was single, and when we grew up together. So
Yeah.
I worked there through an IPO and through a sale, and I did a lot of different jobs. I also got married. I had a child. So just like we both matured, the
Yeah.
company and me, together. And it was a really phenomenal experience because I got the opportunity to do a lot of different things. So um, I went to a class at Harvard and got super excited about customer experience. Came back, wrote a business plan. Was like, we need to implement this. I went and sold the job, got the job that I created. It's like it's a little, maybe a little like greasing greasing the skids, if you will. Um, but and then we started doing some advocacy work in DC, and RC at the time was like, the customers, why don't you come to DC? And so I
Yeah.
started, here I was on the lobbying team. These are just things that over time in a company that's growing like that, you just get those opportunities
Yeah.
to do things that aren't necessarily like exactly in your lane. But it was great. I had the opportunity to work for some incredible leaders there, and learn just a ton myself.
Yeah.
It was a really great run.
That's awesome. I mean, I actually know Netspin because I was consulting and then became a CEO for an email security company in Austin for a period of time, and Netspin was one of our clients. And when they started growing, it was like they were growing like a weed, and it was really cool and fun to see. And like you said, though,
Yeah,
in that environment and in that space, you're actually able to do a lot of different things. And really, the only thing you're limited by is your ability to raise your hand and say, "Sure, let me give it a try." Right?
that's right. That's right. And also, Netspend also had that one. It's a tough space, right? It's
Yeah.
financial services, lots of expectations. You're dealing with people's money, so the stakes are super high. But I learned a lot about information security. I learned a lot about, like I said, government relations. I learned all of these spaces that, like, had I not done financial services, I wouldn't have had that experience. But I got to do B2B, I got to do B2C, and so it was yeah, it was just a really amazing like paid MBA program.
That's a
Like
great.
that's probably I mean a long one, but,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
a really great one.
Well, but that's a pretty significant shift though when you moved to Indeed. What led to that? Because that was a different industry, a different time, but also probably at the time you joined was probably kind of feeling like, you were going back home to that startup kind of feel and hyper growth or about to hit hyper growth. What was it that kind of attracted you to this role?
Yeah, so when I came to Indeed, I came on as the chief of staff for our CEO, Chris Himes. And it was really a friend reached out and said, I think I'd like to refer you, basically. And so she talked to me a lot about Indeed and what the company did. Now, I also had a friend find a job at Netspend on Indeed. And we are really great friends to this day. She was one of the best lawyers we've ever hired, and so I knew that Indeed was pretty good if Kimberly had found Netspend through Indeed, right? So that was like a little bit of a proof point.
A good check mark. Yeah.
Well, good
Yeah.
check mark.
Yeah.
Um, but the friend who referred me is someone I trust, you know, uh, a lot. And so she said that I should really look at the job. I applied on Indeed. So obviously the job was listed on Indeed. And I think I wrote my cover letter about why cover letters are a terrible idea. So but surprisingly, Chris interviewed me, and
That'll get some attention. I mean, that's pretty cool.
I guess, and so I interviewed, and I didn't, I still didn't know much outside of like, it's a job listing site. But the more and more I got to know people, the more interesting the opportunity was. The company was a lot bigger than Netspend was, so like just people wise,
Yeah, yeah,
and revenue wise. And so it was an interesting, is this the right size company? But I thought it would be a really interesting, really great opportunity to work directly for the CEO. Um, I spent most of the interviews. I actually had to do the job one day. So my last interview was a
while you
day
were
in the
still a
life.
candidate. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
I met with every one of the senior leadership team. I had to bring updates back to the CEO, and by the end of the day, I was exhausted, truly exhausted. Um, but I'd had a really good day.
Yeah,
It was really fun. I really enjoyed working with Chris, and it felt like a really good fit, to be able to help him, to be able to participate in the company at that moment.
yeah.
Now, when I started, it was September 2019. And on March 3rd, 2020, we sent everyone to work from home. So
Just
it
a few
was
little challenges, right?
just a few little things that happened along the way.
Yeah,
Um, but it was a really good decision.
yeah. I love it. So what is it? So when you were chief of staff for the CEO, what was it about that experience that led you to be like, hey, there's some other areas within this business that I have a passion for, or I have a interest in contributing. And you clearly already demonstrated like, hey, if the job doesn't exist, I'm gonna make it, right? So I I kind of see how the
I
story
do,
might
I do,
unfold, but I'm
I
curious.
do have a little bit of a track record there.
Yeah,
Yeah, so um, absolutely, the most interesting, amazing, challenging job is the chief of staff. You support the chief, and then you support the staff, and so
yeah,
your job is to like make everyone look good, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you spend you spend all day every day just trying to like smooth things over, make it happen, deal with this crisis, like keep this person happy, do this over here, get this thing done. Um, and that's pretty great for me.
yeah.
I like a lot of variety. So it might be a board meeting, one day, and it might be like making sure that we have like, I don't know, that like I'm trying to think of like some of the more mundane tasks, but like, the talking points are ready, or that the email's
Yeah.
written, or that like, or that there's like the right amount of snacks for the team that we're going to meet with, or
You do
it's
it
just a
all. Yeah.
really like up and down kind of thing. And I loved it.
Yeah.
Um, but it also gave me a pretty good bird's eye view of like where there might be opportunity to make things better. And a huge part of that was, just seeing that there was maybe some opportunity to create more operational rigor for a company that had been growing like crazy.
Yeah.
Could we find some places where we could have repeatable processes? Could we do a little bit more standardization across groups? And so my first role out after chief of staff was operations. um, and could we have like consistency in our global quarterly meetings and our town halls and our offsites and things like that? So there's a lot of that. And then our chief revenue officer left, and left an hole in client success. And so I took that
Yeah.
on. And I had the background at Netspend and client and customer experience. And so that was an interesting, like a little bit of like going home,
Yeah.
but also in a really, really different way. And so, I think that part of it was just like, as chief of staff, sort of seeing what needed to happen. Also having openings helped. So I didn't in fact write my own job description quite this time.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been really great. And so and I continue to take on big cross-functional projects while leading client success, which I actually find really helpful because I have such a grounding now in what clients want, that actually I'm even better from an operational standpoint because as a leader of a large function, I just have a better sense of like what we need to do and how we need to get it done.
I love that. I love the fact that you aren't afraid to try new things and to leverage prior experience to like help you navigate and build on
Yeah.
success in your current role. There's a I think a really super powerful lesson for especially job seekers who might, see this video or hear this on a podcast that resourcefulness that you had is a huge asset to a company. And I think a lot of times, and we can get into talking about specifics a little bit about the job market here in a sec, but really at the end of the day, adaptability is one of those qualities that a lot of leaders are looking for. And they're looking for people that will roll up their sleeves and be like, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out and, figure out where to, get the resources I need internally to fulfill whatever we might need, right? Whether it's addressing the troops, it's kicking off a project, it's corporate alignment or strategic relationships. Having the ability to be adaptable and be willing to learn along the way and not be afraid of that, I think is such a huge value.
It's it's the thing that I look for. I know, and Chris, our CEO, he says he looks for people who have good ideas and get stuff done.
Yeah,
And a lot of times it's hard to get both.
yeah,
And
that's
so
true.
it's like, and so it's something that I strive for a lot. I do really like to get stuff done. But I also try to have some good ideas too. So I think, but I similarly look for people who are unafraid, unafraid of what they don't know, willing to dig in. So I tend to, look for people who aren't just going to float in that leadership bubble where they don't really dig in and get to know what's going on. And so that tends to be the people that I attract to my team. The people that you got the opportunity to get to know a little bit before our session.
Yeah,
And so because like that just it just makes it easier
yeah.
if everybody's curious, if everybody's willing to learn, if everybody's willing to roll up their sleeves and get stuff done, you just can accomplish a lot that way.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I really respect about Indeed, and I think a lot of companies have, sort of one of your co-roles is client success, and people talk about that, but and they even sort of tout it, but very few organizations actually deliver on that. So, from your perspective, what is that what does that portion of your role consist of, and do you have a win or two that you might be able to share with us to be able to say this is what that actually means and how we put it into practice?
Yeah. So for us, client success is really around taking what, the promise that we make, in many cases in the sales cycle of what Indeed's going to deliver and making that actually happen. And so the team is really focused on, how do we onboard you? How do we make sure you understand how the product works? And then how do we make sure that it's set up for you to achieve your goal, which is really growing your business,
Yeah,
making the hire. So that's our mission is to help people get jobs, but we don't help people get jobs if no one's making hires. So
that's
it's a really, we do one of our core values is job seeker first, but the second core value is pay for performance. And so we're really driven by the idea that we make money when our clients are successful. And what that means is like our team has to get after it every single day. There's no like long-term contract that you're locked into. It's like
yeah,
every single day we have to perform. Every day we have to get you the hires. And so I think that changes the dynamic quite a bit in the client success area because we have to always be looking for how we optimize the product for you, how we help you use it better as a client, as an employer.
yeah,
um, One of the things that I'm probably the most proud of is that can also feel a little overwhelming when you have a lot of clients. And so we've been building through AI and machine learning intelligence to help our team zero in on the thing that's going to like make the most value for you. And so instead of as a client success specialist, you walk in and you look at all of your accounts and you try to figure out what you're going to do, we're actually delivering those insights directly to them based on everything that we know about the
Oh,
product and everything we know about the client, and saying, you know what, actually, this person's jobs are underperforming, reach out to them today, get their campaigns fixed, that kind of thing. And so we're just looking for all of those ways to get much more surgical, pinpointed, to make sure that the money that people are spending on Indeed is going towards making hires.
yeah, it's a true partnership, right, with the clients that you serve because you really are taking
Oh,
that necessary step to build that relationship with them so that you can sort of be in the know of what's happening and really for what you do, or for what Indeed does, right? The company sort of needs to know what's happening next quarter or what's happening 6 months from now. Where are the new products and solutions coming down the pipe, and how are we starting to plan for that pipeline for the right kinds of candidates? How do we get that job the right type of attention that it needs? It's a really in-depth process.
it is, and knowing, and knowing like if if my client is a seasonal business, knowing when they need to make those hires in order to get in order to meet their Black Friday goals or
Yeah,
their or tax season, right? So like you're not hiring tax preparers in January, you're hiring them in October, November. And so a huge part of what our team does is really get to know those businesses. When I went to my first client event, I had this woman, Julie, from one of our clients. She came up to me and she's like, "I really love Webb. Like, I really love him. I He's not on my account anymore. I need him back." And that was like
that's
the
huge.
biggest ringing endorsement of
Yeah,
like what Webb had been able to do with her business and how he had like really become part of her team. And I hear
yeah.
that over and over again with clients of like, you know, my person at Indeed is part of my team. And there's just nothing better than hearing
Yeah.
that.
So, I'm curious, like your take on the industry as a whole. Like, back in the day, it was like monster.com or careers.com. There were a number of, especially early days of the internet, right? That job
Yeah.
listing, job posting thing. But and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you sort of just illustrated this in terms of your approach. But a lot of those solutions that were sort of out there and big, because they were doing Super Bowl ads and they were making a
Yeah.
big splash out there in the media and they were doing a big spin, but they were really nothing more than just job lists, right? Yes, they brought it, with a little bit different user feel, and there was a different experience than kind of the one ads approach, but really at the end of the day they weren't really invested in the relationship with the clients they were serving. You have a hire, you need a hire, and list it here, and if you place the job, great, come back to us when it's time for another one. But what I've always interpreted from Indeed, and it sounds like from what you just explained, that you want to be at that table, you want to be in those meetings, you want to be a part of that collective team, because things could really take off for an organization, and you need to be at least prepared for that many months before the rubber meets the road, right? And I sense, based on what I've seen and researched on Indeed, is that you guys really lean fully into that process, and these others just didn't keep up, and therefore you guys were able to take the market lead position.
Yeah, now a lot of that was before I got to Indeed. So
Yeah,
but what I will say is that, if you think, and if you do go all the way back to one ads, you just paid, that people will say like post and pray. So it was just like I pay the money, I post the job, and I hope that someone sees it. Right.
yeah.
I hope someone picks up the
I
paper.
was guilty of
I
that
hope
many
someone
years ago.
I hope someone clicks on Monster. I hope,
Yep,
um, and and so what that meant was you're paying regardless. And you had no idea what kind of
yep,
results you were going to get. And so Ronnie and Paul, our co-founders, they had a couple of key tenants. One, all jobs in one place. So really democratizing the access to jobs. So
yep.
not just for people who went to Monster or other places, not just people who picked up the paper, but like all the jobs, one place, not dependent on who had paid to post on that particular site. And then the second one was pay for performance. So you pay when someone expresses interest in your job. And so
Yep.
you know that you're only paying when you're actually getting traffic and visits and visibility. And I think it just really resonated with people, because one, it made it where job seekers really only had to go to one place. They didn't have to, they didn't have to, like, I saw this job over here, but I didn't see it over here.
Yep.
Um, and Over time, the team just built more and more tools to make it so much easier. We did an exercise, a few offsites ago, where we we had the software that made our computer screens as if we had Parkinson's. Um,
Ooh.
and so and so it made it very difficult to navigate the screen. And so we all had to set up an Indeed profile, with and you could choose different things. So you could choose things that made the screen hard to read, and so for visual impairment. But what we realized is, setting that profile up was really hard. But once my profile was set up, it was a lot easier to apply the second job, the third job, the fourth job.
Yep.
And so things like that build a longer term relationship with both the job seeker and the employer allow Indeed to be a much better matchmaker,
Oh,
between the two. And that's really powerful, right? Because the more we know about job seekers, the more we know about jobs, the better matches that we're able to make. And then all of the friction that we can reduce in that interaction just makes more matches, more hires, more people getting jobs.
I love the fact that you brought up that story because that user experience and how that informs what you do next and how you do it. And having been at least temporarily in somebody's shoes, that's a really challenging situation for them to be engaged or involved in. I think that's phenomenal. I went and spoke at a tech conference last year for women in tech in Philly, and one of the speakers before me was actually they had done the user interface for Clear, and what Clear
Oh
ended up
yeah.
doing was they had put these, obviously Clear does everything based on your eye, and their devices had been deployed, but they hadn't done any user testing, and their tech team had basically put out, the standard set of requirements. Well, it didn't take into account very tall people and very short people. And airports, because they didn't want anything that could be used as a weapon, right, at security, they removed all the step stools, which just cleared out like a huge chunk of people. And it really took this, I mean, it was basically a user interface design specialist that came in, and the first thing she did was she was telling the audience this. She's like, I kicked off my heels and I went to my normal height, and I was like this far from where I needed to be. And she said, I would not, nobody would have known that. Nobody would have done it because, you have a set of requirements, people deliver those requirements, and then nobody thought to test it, up or down or adjustable, units where they could be adaptable. They just fully invested in, kind of the straightforward, their manufacturer, just here's the specs, right? And it wasn't until they actually went back and said, hey, we need to put ourselves in the literally the shoes or not shoes of the our actual users and see where our problems are, that they discovered they had a pretty major problem. And they couldn't figure out why in some of the more higher volume airports people were just not going to Clear even though they had a Clear status, right? So it was,
Mhm.
nobody could figure it out on the executive team. They're like, I don't understand, we have all these travelers that are going through, but we don't know why they're not coming through our line or they're not using our devices. And it took someone from outside to actually really put that through the paces to see how it worked. And so I hadn't actually heard another great example to that until you just talked about, filling out the profile as someone who has Parkinson's. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, one of the back to the Netspend days, one of the things that we did is our CEO at the time came to me and said, I don't want to do another holiday party. I want to do a customer empathy event.
Hmm.
And so we gave everybody a paper check, we put everybody in teams, and the teams were, an executive down to like a individual contributor, so like the last person in the company might be in a team with the CEO. We gave them a paper check and we gave them a net spend card, and we told them, and they had to go to a different part of the city and they had to cash the check. They had to get the money on the card. And then they had a list of tasks. They had to get pay for someone's gas. They had to get groceries. They had to
Wow.
pay a bill, and they had $400. Like, so they had a budget, and they had to do as much good as they could in a day. And we never had a holiday party again. That's what we did. And the first team that came back, because everyone was in teams, and we had trial. Oh, and we also used public transportation because it's not a really common thing in Austin to use public transportation. So
Yep.
our team wasn't really used to it. And in fact, they were like, "We're going to take the bus." I was like, "Yes, you're going to take the bus."
Big learning curve.
And
Yep.
so big learning curve. And so they came back. This team came back and they said, "Lisa, we just had the most interesting experience. We went to the gas station to buy someone's gas, and we asked him how much it would take to fill up his tank, and he didn't know." And they're like, "Have you ever?" And he said, "I only put $10 in at a time." And we were doing gas authorization holds, right? So like if you were going to do $10, then we would add, because it would auth, and then we would have to
Yep.
add up to a larger amount. And the team came back and we're like, we have to do something totally different, because
Wow.
our customers are not using the card the way that we use our, credit card, backup plan, debit card,
Yeah.
et cetera. And so it totally changed. It was just like such an enlightening moment.
Yeah.
Your story of the heels and the step stool and all that stuff. It's like, yes, like those were the kinds of stories that we heard so much, and just really drove it home. Because there'd be an engineer on the team going like, "You know what, we need to do something about this." I'm like, "Do." And so I am a huge believer in customer empathy. One of the things that we do at Indeed is we do all of our own hiring using our tools. And so if we have a new interview platform, our team is using it. If we have a new scheduling, our team is using it. If we, and so it's extremely, extremely helpful. And then we give each team member at Indeed credit that they can go help a small business or a nonprofit. And that also helps them sit alongside a business as they're using Indeed. And the innovate, like, it's just amazing that I'm such a huge believer in customer empathy, but like both from a UX, but also just from a like, just really helps you understand how customers are using the product, what they actually need. You just do a better job.
I love that. It's one thing to actually do the experience, but what it sounds like you guys are really good at as well, and it sounds like you did that at Netspin as well, but is not just get in the, proverbial shoes of your customers, but to actually have the conversation and communication. The one thing that I preach all the time to the folks that I talk to or I might do coaching or consulting with is that clients, they're paying you for whatever it is, product or service, but they want to know that you kind of live it with them, and the good, the bad, the ugly. And oftentimes I think you see a lot of, especially in tech, right? It's, well, that's just the way it is, or we didn't build it that way, or there's no way we can adjust it or fix it. Well, you can't adjust or fix something you don't know is broken or is not liked or not appreciated by a client. And the only way you get there is by going through that experience yourself, and or hopefully both, actually engaging the customer and saying, okay, what can we do differently? What can we do better? I own a software company in Austin as well, in addition to what I do for Ripple. And the one thing that I tell all of our prospective clients is, hey, look, we're not selling software here. We're selling a partnership. And with the partnership, I want to hear from you as the CEO, the good, bad, and the ugly, and what you don't like about our platform and what you do like, and where can we make the improvements, because they're the ones that are in the field utilizing the technology. And we can make assumptions, but that's all it is. And one of my biggest and favorite phrases is it factor, is it assumption? And especially when it comes to a customer
Mm.
support issue, or it comes to a new feature, or something along the lines that's bubbled up, we'll have people that say, well, I don't think that's important, or customers aren't going to like that. Well, is that factor, is it assumption? Do we actually talk to anybody to understand that? And we're in the
Yeah.
process of building out some new iterations to our platform. And much of what we're doing is from that collaborative approach where clients are actually sitting there and going, I like this, I don't like that. This is what I need. This is what drives me nuts. And there's just no replacement for it. But a lot of companies just don't go to that level of detail, right? And I love the fact that you guys are doing that because it's so important. And in your space especially, that industry has changed so dramatically, even in the last several years.
Yeah.
It is, being, sort of lockstep, shoulder to shoulder with your clients, I think is probably why you guys have the reputation that you do.
Thanks. I think it's really important. We also have an amazing user experience research and design group that we work really closely with, and that's literally all they do.
Yeah.
But I find that it's also really helpful to have the engineering leader, the product leader, the client success specialist have those experiences as well. And if you live it as a company, then you don't, it doesn't have to be the UX person or the client success person saying like we need this. Like the engineer sees it themselves,
Yeah.
and that is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
So um,
I don't know if this story is true. I spoke out at Microsoft a few years back, and somebody was up. It was an internal event that I was at, so I got to see a couple of other speakers that they brought in. But one of them was a former Microsoft executive that had left and gone out into the consulting world. They were talking about experience, and they said, the reason that Windows 3.0 got quickly replaced by Windows 3.1, and people are like shaking their head, and they work for the company, and they're like, Bill Gates could not get the damn drive to work, right? His disk would not work. And it's like, this is not going to, this is not the way we're going to do it, and if I can't make it operate, and I own, at that point, probably, they were publicly traded, but technically owns the company, right? And he couldn't get it to work. How could the average customer in, nowhere, Kansas, right, be able to do it? So I thought, yeah, that was it was a really interesting perspective on you got to, and that's kind of where apparently their phrase that you got to eat your own dog food. You have, like you said, we use our own tools to do our own vetting, to do our own interviewing and hiring, and practice our skill sets in that regard. And I just love that because I think that's the only way you get so close to hitting on the target.
I do think that the CEO title is also the chief product breaker. So I do think I think that's like actually
Were
probably
you
like
talking to my
how
team earlier? I mean, come on.
it is. I have a sample size of a couple, and it's
Pretty
pretty much
consistent.
held. It's pretty consistent. And I will say it, I mean, here at Indeed, we really like to say, drink our own champagne. We
Yep.
decided that dog food wasn't necessarily what we wanted
Doesn't.
to be eating,
Yeah.
but we do really, really believe in that philosophy. And from our CEO, all throughout the team. So it's really essential. All of us will be job seekers at some point in our
That's right.
careers, and we firmly believe that, and in our evolution, that's why we're in the middle of really rethinking, like, it used to be you just typed in a job title and a location, and we're really looking at how we go beyond that, because people are a lot more than just a job title and
Yeah.
a city. But it is like it is somehow in the requirements of CEOs to be able to find the one thing that doesn't work.
That's right. Well, I'm a master at that. I tell people
Yeah.
I'm the CEO of this software company, but I'm really the CDG, the chief dumb guy. So, if I can operate this thing, then anybody can operate it. So,
I
and if it's
somehow
going to
don't
break,
buy
I will
it,
break it.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
without question. I
that's
love
right.
that.
That's right.
So let's switch gears for a second. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty relative to the job market today. There's
Uh,
obviously, um, nobody knows how things are going to shake out. We have a new administration. There's obviously a lot of concerns. There have been a huge amount of tech layoffs, obviously in Austin as well. How does Indeed look at those things that are occurring, and how are you guys preparing for that so that you're on the cutting edge and you're out ahead of tip of the skis, so to speak, on some of these things that are evolving, that markets and tariffs and all these things are changing, which we don't control, but in your space you have to be really super adaptable. So what's the thought process that you guys are going through at this point with regards to the way the job market is today?
Yeah, so Indeed has definitely been through all of the swings, right? So founded in 2004 and been through quite a few of these economic, a lot of the economic turmoil. I think one thing that clients really value about Indeed is we don't have long-term contracts, and
Yeah.
so it's really helpful for because we can be there for clients in the upswings and the downswings, and we can really adjust. They really can adjust the way that they operate with us. That certainly creates challenges for us, so we have to be really, really thoughtful about how
Yeah.
we do that. But the other thing that we just are stay super focused on the mission of helping people get jobs, and so in these times of turmoil, our job seekers need us immensely.
Yeah.
And our employers, once they start getting overloaded with applications, they really need help sorting through those.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mean that no one's hiring. It just means that like they're being a little bit more selective. And so we look at both of those problems when it's tough to get job seekers. We want to be there to help get as many eyeballs on jobs as possible, get as much applicant flow as possible. And then when you're getting overloaded with applicant flow, and this can happen to the same company within like highly sought after jobs, we want to be there to use that same matching that we do for jobs and job seekers to help you understand which are the best applicants, and really speed up the process for your team. Because I feel like when you're not hiring a ton is when it really matters how long it takes you to get that person in.
Yeah,
And
that the
so,
risk is so high at that point. I mean, if you're hiring a bunch of people, that it kind of mitigates the risk, but when that one or two people, it's you got to swing for the fences and you got to make contact and you got to have
yeah.
some runs, right?
And especially for folks that, an employee is a revenue line, right? So
Yeah,
there are lots of companies out there that if they don't fill their hiring targets, making they're not making money. They're not,
that's right.
they're not running that shift. They're just a lot of those out there. And so I think we find that in these times of crisis, this is really it's one when we have some of our best innovations because we have to get really creative about how to do things. I think about our video interviewing and our Indeed hiring events went virtual very, very fast in the
Yeah,
pandemic. And so we built an entire because we'd been running in people we'd been running in-person hiring events for a long time, and then we took everything virtual, so built a video interview platform that allowed a virtual lobby and to be able to take in a lot of candidates. And so right now I feel like we're having to really move ahead with our the help that we can provide employers of taking large numbers of candidates and really getting down to the folks that you should either be interviewing or making offers to.
that I love that. Do you have a sense that this kind of cultural shift about we've got these competing uh, different demographics relative to job experience and age, the challenges that there are for a lot of organizations are really struggling to figure out the right people to put on the bus, right, and the to
Mm.
fill their talent pool. Is that something that you guys are, actively working on to say, okay, look, I guess the reason I'm asking this is I was thinking about several people that are in my community for the Ripple that, you know, they either have gotten to a point where they've been forced to retire or they had a layoff that, they didn't expect. They've been with the organization. Their only network has actually been at that company for so
Mm.
long. And it's
Yeah.
kind of easy to kind of point fingers at like companies like Dell, where people have been there and that's been home for a long time, and then this unexpected shift occurs, and it can be somewhat intimidating and difficult for a candidate to say, look, how can I take this experience where I've been in one or two companies as a career path, because that's how my generation, that's kind of what you were supposed to do, and then you have this younger generation that's coming in and be like, hey, I'm going to switch jobs every 9 to 18 months. And how do you find the right fit for those organizations, and how to make sure that you're delivering those candidates, because when a company, and you alluded to this, right, it's a huge investment of time and money to bring somebody in, and I think that the older workforce that has maybe still looking for that last act in their career path is such an untapped resource today. And then, but how do you, as a hiring manager or leadership group within an organization, look at that and then also understand, like, hey, you could bring in this next, younger workforce, but they may not be with you forever because there's not a lot of loyalty there. They may look for the next job, or they were kind of looking for the job when they found this one. They'll continue to look and see what greener pastures are. So it's a really interesting but also a difficult kind of time for organizations because there's a lot of turmoil on either end of that coin, right?
Yeah, I think, one client that I talked to recently, I'll just talk a little bit maybe about some examples because I
Yeah.
don't know that there's like an answer. Um, but they mainly hire people for their management trainee program, right? And so what they're looking at is they're bringing folks in, they're hiring them for their management trainee program, and then they're building their career. And so I think that is a huge part of the opportunity with the younger generation is to because part of changing frequently is trying to find that opportunity to grow.
Yep.
And so if you build that in for the younger generation, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
If you craft it in such a way that you can change jobs every 18 months, and
But
you
within
grow
our
that talent.
organization. Yeah. Yep.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Like lateral, there's such amazing opportunity there. And, you know, as a training program, rotations are really powerful. We've done a lot of that at Indeed, just, even to cover parental leave. So if someone's out on caregiver leave, we're taking folks and saying, hey, why don't you do this job while for the 6 months that that person's out, which gives them some on the job training, some some real world experience. So we've been calling them like internal apprenticeships basically.
Mm, I love that.
Now, that I think is like, I see that as a huge opportunity. We've been taking non-technical folks and doing a technical apprenticeship. Folks in client success, operations, spending time with our engineering team learning to code. And so they have these, we have a class of 10 that just graduated and they're doing great.
That's awesome.
Um, on the other end, I think for folks that are looking for their last act, it is really, really difficult. And I think that is a place that I don't know that I've heard of anyone kind of cracking that nut,
Yeah.
so to speak. I think that the caregiver leave coverage is an interesting idea related to that and sort of that opportunity to do a 6-month stint. My mom keeps offering to be the librarian at Indeed because she really likes our offices, and she would like an internship. Um, we haven't quite approved that yet, but I do see that opportunity for folks that are looking for maybe a 6-month engagement, maybe a short term.
Yeah.
Um, as a part of our overall parent company, Staffmark is one of our sister companies, and so I do see them have uh, have some opportunities for folks that are not looking for like that mid career
Yeah.
leadership job. Um, but I do think that's a place that we have to do way more innovation, and that I do see colleagues, friends, folks in my network that are looking for those opportunities. Aunts and uncles that have left the government. That
Yep.
tends to be a earlier retirement, looking for those opportunities. And in some cases, there are some natural places, right? There's consulting, there's different things, but I think there's an opportunity for something a little bit more structural. And
I
so,
love that. I love that
um,
you tapped on both of those because it really, at the end of the day, I mean, it's a brilliant thought process that you have because at the end of the day, it's like when you think about um, the younger generation that is looking to be challenged, they want to have. I don't think it's that they are flighty. I don't think it's that they are, that they just jump ship because they jump ship. I think a lot of the younger generation. They just want to be doing work that they feel has meaning and has purpose, but it really comes down to the companies giving them, the attention that is necessary to say, look, we want to be able to leverage your skill sets and your abilities in other capacities, and so here's a couple of different directions you can take your career. I think, at least from my experience, you don't see a lot of companies doing that, but you really need to be out in the forefront doing that to keep that younger generation engaged and committed to your organization, and that they can see the potential, like you said, a lateral move, or they can see a potential up for their career path. But and then the older workforce, there are just so many good, really quality candidates. I'm speaking at a job club on Monday, and I've
Mm.
done several this year, and the majority of the older workforce, they're like, there's just ageism out there, and I'm not getting my resume looked at. I'm certainly going to put in a plug for you and your team, obviously the great work you're doing on
Right.
Monday. But what I always try to tell employers is that there's gold on both sides of those hills, right? But the ones that have been there, done that have that experience, even if they are, government, transitioning
Yeah.
military, they've been in the corporate world, and someone that had worked at IBM for 15 years brings a crazy amount of life experience and work experience to a small startup. And getting people to look upstream and say, look, this is, kind of the talent, but you need to have diversity within that workforce, and I think you want to be able to have representation across the board from the generational perspective. But I feel like the younger generation, is getting a bad rap, and I think the older generation just doesn't get the look. And I love the fact you guys are looking at that and finding ways to do it, because there's an unbelievable untapped number of resources there. I have a little community we call the Pond, and we created just a space within the Pond called Career Ripple. And one of the areas that came out really quickly was a lot of the folks that were joining were retirees that actually have lost their network, their day-to-day purpose, their friends at work, their networks, were all related to their jobs. Then when they retire and they're not ready to hang it up, they don't know what they're going to do next yet, but they feel lost. And then they feel really, I don't want to use the word, but it's probably accurate, really inadequate about getting back into it and figuring out where they might play and fit. I told this group that we have this thing called Beyond Ripple. So you're retired, but you don't want to fully be retired. You want to do something
Mm.
else. And one of the things that I tell everybody is go watch that Robert De Niro movie called The Intern, right? It shows that someone with that
Good.
experience that can come back in to an organization, but you need a company to believe in you and give you a shot.
Yeah, I will also say one of the people I admire so much is my dad, and he's been retired for a while, but he is a water tester. He's a marine mammal rescue volunteer. He calls bingo at church, and I
I
think
love it.
I say that because he's built a network, and
Yeah.
he'd worked at the same company for 39 years, and that was his professional network. And he's rebuilt his network through these volunteer activities that have given him so much joy.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's not the full answer, but you do have to find those ways. The loneliness epidemic
Huge.
is really huge, and so I think there are some really incredible opportunities out there, that people might find through volunteering that could turn into other things. And so I'm just such an advocate for, because just watching it, from the initial time that he was retired to the really, really active life that he has now it's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, a lot of our folks in the retirement space that we've created within the Pond, they're busier now than they ever have been. They're like,
Well,
I thought I was busy when I was working, but I guess the real question is, what do we need to do to get your mom hired over there as the librarian? I mean, does she needs to know a
I
senior vice president? I think.
she says stuff like that too, Steve.
Well, I
Interestingly,
will.
she thinks the same
I'll
thing.
endorse her.
Thanks, I appreciate it. She'll appreciate that.
That's awesome. Well, I could talk to you all day long because there's just so many different interesting ways that we could take this conversation. But I want to be respectful of your time because I know you're in demand and have a very packed schedule. So I want to be respectful of that. But I always like to finish these interviews, and I would love to open the door for another conversation because there is just, I think, a lot more that we could dig into. And as you have time, I would certainly invite you back because I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy this particular episode, and they're going to want to know more. And so hopefully you'll come back. But we always like to finish up these interviews with a few what I call ripple connection questions, just to give people a little bit more sense of who you are and kind of different than the job and a little bit different than what you've already shared today, but a little more personal insight. If you're okay with that.
That sounds great.
Awesome. So I guess my first question I would love to ask is, what did the 7-year-old Lisa want to be when she grew up? As she was traveling all over the world, or all over the country.
So interestingly enough, I actually had this question. I think they said 8, but I think it was like pretty solid.
Okay.
I thought that the height of life would be to live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, go to LSU, and drive a
Ooh,
little red convertible. I had no idea what kind of job I was going to do. I just was going to go to college in at LSU, and my dad had season tickets when I was young, and so I learned, it takes four downs to get 10. You have four chances to get 10 yards
yep,
from right there in Tiger Stadium, and so
yep.
I didn't think much past that.
I
That's pretty
love
much
that.
it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, see, and if you had gone to LSU now, they probably would give you that little red convertible with the NIL money. So
That
we
I
missed our
hadn't thought
window,
of that,
Lisa.
Steve. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
Okay, so I answered this question. This is a little embarrassing, to the founder of Indeed on one of my first events here. And I said, oh, I would just connect people. I would just spend all day
Uh,
connecting people. And he pointed out that that was my actual job. So, so I think I am in the right spot.
Oh, I love that. I love that. When you think about you said you have a daughter. Do you have one child or
I do.
two?
I
Or
have a
okay,
13-year-old daughter named
okay,
Marley.
okay. 13-year-old daughter, and your other child is how old?
Oh no, I just have
Oh, just
one.
one.
Just
I'm
one.
sorry. Sorry, I
Yeah. Yeah.
misunderstood. Okay,
Yeah.
so the 13-year-old daughter, when she looks through the lens of what mom does, what do you want her to think and say to people?
I want her to see somebody that gives back, and that really cares about people, and cares about the community, and does as much as she possibly can to make the world a better place.
I love that. And that's evident by your tagline on LinkedIn. I help people get jobs. I just
Yeah,
love it. It's simple, it's easy, it's straightforward, and
that's
you're
right.
clearly very, very good at it. I think that's fantastic. If you had to pick one, we'll call it superpower or skill that you actually don't get to use at your job, what would that be?
Do I have this superpower skill,
Hey, if you have
or
it
I
or you
could
wish you
just
had it,
Okay. I did. I read the Harry Potter thing last week in Orlando, and I don't want to
oh,
fly. I
you don't.
I was I was nauseous, so I'm not interested in flying. I
Was it
decided
that
that that's
broom
the
one?
superpower I don't want. It's whatever one that you're like the screen is coming at you and you're flying.
Yeah.
I so I told everybody, if anyone ever asks me what superpower I don't want, it is flying. Um,
I love that
I
answer.
what's interesting, Steve, is like I feel like, and this is like one of the things that I really value in work is like I bring all my superpowers to work, and I don't. There isn't a lot of like, oh, I don't do that at work,
Yeah.
so like the things that I do, like I just you get it all. You get me, you get my family, you get like everybody's like you get my husband, you get my daughter, you get like you sort of get everything.
It's a package deal.
It's a package deal, so there aren't like superpowers that I use outside of work because I uh pretty good at event planning, but I'll use that. Like I just bring it all.
You
So
do it
I
all.
think that's like
I love it.
that's the like it's all in.
I do it all. It might be the best superpower I've heard so far. I think that's if you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
Oh, one word. Tenacious.
Oh, that's a good word. I love that.
Yeah.
If you could give any advice to job seekers that are out there that are feeling frustrated or are concerned about what they're seeing or reading in the press, what would you tell them?
Really be open to trying new things. And sort of I like to ask people to do an exercise where you keep track of what you've done and mark whether or not it gave you energy or drained your energy,
Yeah.
and focus on jobs and opportunities that give you energy, regardless of like what the title is, and sort of some of the things that you think might be important,
Yeah.
but focus on working for somebody who sees you and values you, doing things that bring you energy and meaning. And I think it's really, which means you have to open your aperture. You have to like really think a lot different, bigger and differently. I'm a huge fan of the Designing Your Life book,
Yeah.
um, like design thinking applied to your life. And so I think, especially now with everything, all the technological advances, all of the uncertainty, um, really, really being open to where the possibilities could be, I think is going to be the most important, attribute in this particular job market.
I love that. Um, if you could put one piece of advice on a billboard that everybody sees on the way to or from work every day or school, what would you say, or what would you put on that billboard?
So there's a very specific answer that at the entrance to I-35 from 7th Street, it would say, drive forward before you merge. Every single day, Steve, I try to figure out how I'm going to get that billboard onto the median so that I could just get people to pull forward before they merge. So
Ah,
that's my un that is my very specific plea to anyone in Austin that at 5 o'clock is trying to merge on I-35.
that's good. I
Um,
love that. That's great advice. And actually, we should just buy a bunch of those billboards and put them everywhere because it's a problem everywhere.
that'd be great. Um, but I think I don't know. I have so many. Like I feel like there's so many. I actually have this. I have this truths for our daughters that sits. A friend of mine gave this to
Oh,
me years ago, and it's called Truths for Our Daughters, and it sits next to my daughter's picture. But it has like all of these little sayings, like be prepared, practice, know the numbers inside and out. But the last line is be ready for anything.
ah,
And I think that would be mine.
I love that. I love that.
But I
Last two
want the
questions.
merging one.
Yeah, that one's up there too. I mean, those are both great. I love that. Last two questions. So, when you hear the term ripple effect, what does that mean or conjure up for you?
I mean, it's so powerful. It's just that idea that, a small change starts, a small change has such a big impact. And I think that is a lot of how I live my life, is really focusing on making sure I have a great team, making sure they're really supported by me, and then watching other people watch that, and try to exemplify it themselves. And so I really love the idea of small changes making big impacts, which is, in many ways like what I think of when I think of the ripple effect.
That's a great answer. I love that. And my last question would be, what ripple can I be looking to create for you?
Oh, I mean, I think I said it with the merging, right? Like, because if
I
we could
might have
make that
implied I had a
happen,
pull with the
Steve.
billboard people, but I don't.
I mean, I'm telling you, Steve, if we could get this done, I
we,
did say
we,
tenacious.
yeah, yep. I love.
Um, Yeah, I think the more we can, I think the more we can reach more people with the idea of being open to life's possibilities, really thinking about what makes them happy, and pursuing that, and sort of designing their lives with intentionality. That certainly would be a really great. That would be a really great effect.
I love that. That's fantastic. Well, I will do whatever I can to support you and help you in that capacity for sure. Is there any way that you want people to maybe follow you? Do you have social handles or anything that you want to share here? We can
Oh,
certainly include those links.
um, I mean, certainly would welcome anyone to follow on LinkedIn, Lisa Henkin Ramirez. So it's my full maiden and married name, and that's probably the best way.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Perfect. And
awesome.
you said at the very beginning of this interview that you don't view yourself as a rock star. You are totally wrong. I'm just going to tell you that. You are awesome. I
It's very,
mean, I
very,
I had such a great time, and I'm so
really
appreciative that you
fun.
made time to come on, and I really really appreciate it. I have followed you on LinkedIn for a while before I actually reached out, and I just the work that you're doing. Obviously, the company you work for is changing lives on the daily, and that's really important to me. And creating so many positive ripples out there, even in a world that has a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of turmoil happening right now, it's good to know that you guys are doing work to support people and organizations that are still driving forward before they merge. And
That's right.
so I think what you're doing is great. So
Right. Awesome.
I just really
Thanks,
really
Steve. I really
appreciate it.
appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so
Great.
much for joining the Ripple Effect podcast. I really appreciate it. Lisa, thank you for being here. And we'll be back with another episode very soon. But until then, Lisa, ripple on.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.